Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundless success to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. Before I do anything else, I'm going to take a deep breath. In, out. Bill Correll here with my sidekick, cohort partner in knocking people alive, Jan Jeremias. And I also lovingly refer to her as my twin, and I do that with so much love in my heart. We are not close to each other's vision of the world, except for we both want to make it a better place and leave everybody that we come into contact with empowered. Jan, how are you doing today?
I'm okay, Bill. Thanks. I'm happy to be here with you.
Good. I'm pleased for that. So there's a lot going on in the world. And I think there's a couple of things that I just wanted to talk about in general, whether it has to do with politics in the recent election, or it has to do with football and the playoffs and whose teams won and lost and all that sort of thing. There's a lot of folks whose I would say that their expectations have been unmet in a lot of different areas. And so when it comes down to it, it kind of seeps over into what they focus on and what they present to the world. I'll give you an example of that. Um, there's kind of a group of people on Facebook, that I'm in constant contact with every single day. There's a thing called Pokes. I don't know if you're aware of that or if you're even on Facebook to do it, but it's just an application where it keeps a list of people who have poked you, and then when you poke them back, they poke you again. Well, there are some people that I've been poking with from all over the world since 2008. This is how we have maintained a relationship, having never met each other. Some of these folks are in Philippines, Malaysia, Australia. I got a gal in Nigeria, another one in South Africa. It just goes on and on. And then there's all the up and down the East Coast, because I have a lot of friends on Facebook. But my point is that not only do we poke each other every day, we also share things about health, what's going on in our families, who's having birthdays, graduations, what have you. But if I were going to give everybody kind of a grade on overall happiness slash being healthful or having their mind in a good place here, January 27th, 2025, I would have to give them at best maybe a B or a B plus. And these folks are mostly A players, if you know what I mean. If you're going to bet on them, you would bet for them to go ahead and get the high grade and get an A. So what I'm really wondering right now is what's missing. This is like if we were going to take on our culture or our community and kind of ask them as a group, do you need a hug? What do you need in this moment? And I would kind of like to open that up to you and just see what your thoughts are, Jan.
Oh gosh, Bill. At this point, I'm not sure it's any different than a lot of the things we talk about every week. It just seems to be magnified at the moment. Um, I think there's a lot of I don't know, from my perspective of what I'm seeing.
Right.
I think there's a lot of fear out there, a lot of insecurity, a lot of like questions about the future, and I think that change is hard for people. I mean, change is one of the hardest things that we go through is dealing with change and knowing things are going to change, and kind of like that anxiety of like, okay, how do I prepare for this exactly when I really don't know what's going on or
Yeah.
going to happen. So that's what I see is this feeling of, you know, the unknown, you know, that sort of global, like that sort of feeling outside yourself that's like, you know, the unknown. And, so I think that that makes it really scary for people. And I think at this point, part of it is that, I have a really close friend and we talk a lot about foundation.
Yep.
Like, what is our foundation? And I think when people's foundation is not very strong, which I don't know if people's are, like, I don't know, how often people check in with, what their foundation is. What do they value? What do they think is important? Ask themselves some of those questions of like, okay, this is what I feel is really important in my life. This is what, and, if you don't have that foundation, then there's nothing to sort of, there's no place to move from. You're kind of like an untethered kind of, you're like a kite in the wind, just kind of, even then you have a cord, but without the cord, it's like you have this, feeling like you're this kite without a string on it, and you're just kind of in midair.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a big sense of that, and I have had so many thoughts while you were speaking. Just a range of different things from just people on Facebook making their Facebook picture black, um, posting diatribes that are like 600-700 words long, talking about what they're never going to do. Uh, what they're angry about, what there's this, and you and I both know what you think about, you'll become and bring about. Okay, so I'm careful about what I say about the future because I want the future that I want, not the one that I don't want. You know what I mean? So with that said, the fear, is self-propagating in many instances, and then there's also agreement out there that there's something to be afraid of. The the fear is of the unknown, and then there's the general reason for malaise isn't because they know what the fear is going to be. They're afraid of what it might be, and then there's this big, you know, not big, it's just a few people that are very vocal about it. I call them, the thought leaders in terms of whatever it is they're the thought leader of. But I'm wondering about, in those instances, are they really doing something good, or are they substituting something missing in their life by really amplifying and glorifying complaining? Okay. And
As you're saying that, Bill, I mean, part of me is, since I spend a lot of time now in the world of like, kind of acknowledging how you're feeling, and being okay with whatever you're feeling. Like if you're, just not trying to push it away, trying to really, and and moving out in the world from that place of being authentic. And I think that that's, the fine line of like, am I complaining for the sake of complaining? Or is this really the way I feel? So this is how I'm going to show up to some extent.
yeah,
But the other part that happens is I feel like people do that. I mean, I'm sure there are groups. I'm sure there are groups that of people. I don't want to say everybody who goes on through these diatribes on Facebook is, is in one category or another. Like, I think
yeah,
there are probably people there who just want to complain, and there are probably people there who don't have anybody to share with and anybody to like that's going to listen to them. So they do it on Facebook. There's also this kind of, like you said, no black face. So there's kind of this like animosity, like, like is sort of lack of presence or lack of ownership because your face isn't there. You're not having a conversation like we are today, where I see you. So there is this kind of disassociation from it because you're like, it's like sending a text with it. It's like there's no one you don't really see the other person you don't really see the other person on the other end, right? So there's no visual eye contact, facial expressions, body expressions. So I think there's that also. So there is this safety in doing it that way because you don't necessarily need to read the comments. You can just put whatever you want out there and say, okay, well, I'm going to put out this. I mean, then what's the purpose? But I think people are looking for someone to listen to them in some instances.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I don't know. Back in the 1990s, the training that I went through, there was the guy who led the training on the weekends. He was called a forum leader, and the whole nature of the training was, the whole ontological review of the question of what's possible. And he said, in our culture, we mostly become friends with people that we share complaints with, So you can get together and really kind of distinguish the vicissitudes of the complaint that you have in common with somebody else and really share it down to a very detailed, visceral level. And when I'm thinking about how people are, there's different groups of people out there. Some are complaining about another group. Some are complaining about the whole world. Some are complaining about themselves. And I think in the complaining, I think all of it is to try to fill a hole. When I was growing up, and even I'm going to give church a real good score in terms of being a hole filler through most of my life. There was a period of time after which it was no longer a hole filler, and I wonder if there aren't a lot of other people that are just not going to church and listening to an inspiring sermon once a week, something that makes them think about their life in general that they can take away and do something positive with. I think for a lot of times in my life, that was the only time during the course of the week where I could decompress, where I could actually get outside of myself for a minute, listen very carefully to what was being said in the sermon, and then really kind of, connect with my faith. And that's what worship became for me. I haven't worshiped per se since around 2003 or 2004. Personal reasons, all the rest of that. But most of the rest of the people that I know of, they don't have that in their life anymore either. So what are they filling it up with? Is it things that are good for them? Is it I talk about in my podcast, Simple Questions for 100 People. What do you do to intentionally waste time? What's interesting to me is there are some people, not the answers that I've received out of the 54 people that I've interviewed, but there are people who spend hours, on X or hours on Instagram, or, seriously, 7-8 hours a day on one of these social media platforms, TikTok, what have you. It becomes, I think, both a drug and at the same time a place where they feel like they're accomplishing and building something. Does that make any sense, Jan?
I mean, yes, I agree. I think that people look at, and I think that that's why, I'm not really practicing of my faith in a lot of ways. But I think that what you talk about as far as church, I think that was what, for a long time, depending on how religious you were, that was what daily prayer was. It was a time for, introspection, or that's what it should have been, let alone the fact that you were saying specific prayers. But it was a time in your day where it was quiet. Like at that point, it was quiet. There were no distractions. I mean, maybe, your mind wandered, but I mean, no outward distractions. The inner distractions are always there because we're human beings, but the outward distractions, and it was disciplined and regimented, so it happened all the time and pretty much the
Right.
same time every day. So it was, and if you look to meditation, that's what a lot of people's meditation practices are, just that. especially traditional meditation where people like, sit at a specific time of day and they don't, so basically it was that time for introspection, which to me, I look at, maybe people, I'm hoping, or from what I see, I mean, I could be a limited view because I'm around people who are in this kind of sort of mindfulness meditation. A lot of what I listen to is these people who really do value that time every day in whatever form to kind of reflect or get quiet, whether it be minutes a day.
Right.
So I do agree with you that people, I think the other thing that when you were describing of how much time is, I think when people are basically, I want to say in pain, and the fact of like unsure about life, uncomfortable, maybe unhappy, all these things you mentioned, social media, binge watching is a, and I'm saying, I mean, I have like, I've been binge watched a show a number of times,
Yeah.
as Aries, but it's a great way to distract yourself and not have to focus on what you're going through. I
Right.
mean, it's like, oh my gosh, like it's like, and I think that that's more to me, that's probably a dominant reason is people use it as a substitute for relationships. They don't have
Yes.
to worry about if they're lonely, which is a
Yeah.
huge issue nowadays, and lack of connection because it's just, okay, well, I'll sit and I'll binge watch, the next 10 episodes of whatever show for the next 10 hours. And I don't have to deal with the fact that it's a weekend or a holiday and I'm all by myself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting kind of a dynamic. I love what you're saying, and I would predict that the folks that you hang out with, most of them have full, rich lives, and they're up to something and building something pretty much all the time. Um, but the other thing that I'm thinking is that we live in a time in our country and in our particular culture where affluence, I think affluence, and I'm going to describe that and kind of define it as having sufficient um, everything that you are no longer in the survival or building mode. That that you're at this point in your life, from a finance standpoint, um, your life is pretty well taken care of. You have some things. You've got a roof over your head. And there's something about having people struggle. I mean, meaning in a meaningful way where they're applied to it, not where they're avoiding applying themselves. But affluence is where people, it's kind of like the Marie Antoinette quote, let them eat cake. Now, she was not being snide, in my opinion, the way I read that. And I read it in French, in high school. I think what she was saying is in her life, didn't she thought everybody lived like her, you know, that what are they complaining about? It's a beautiful life. And with no idea and would never have an opportunity to see, people struggling to just get enough food to get by, one day to the next. In our society, I think that part of us feels like what we have is not only not good, I've heard it called bad, and at the same time, it doesn't have any value to them because they've never had to work for it. We have generations now, two generations in a row, where they have not had the American dream available to them. I'm talking about after 2008. What we actually had was a whole generation of kids. The next 10 years wound up spending a lot of that time because they couldn't pay for their college loans, and they couldn't pay for, I mean, a lot of them didn't have enough money to even pay for rent. like what you and I did, living with somebody else to share the expenses when we got out of college. We did that all the time. It's way too much for most kids these days. And so now we had that 10-year generation, and then the last 10-year generation, they've stopped having children in many cases. They've stopped getting married in many cases. So there's a shift going on that I don't understand, and I'm not giving it any kind of an up or a down. I'm just saying I think it's something that needs to be aware of, and that if we're mindful and looking for it in our lives, where we see people that are expressing themselves very eloquently in terms of what's wrong with the world and getting a lot of agreement about that, I think that that is pent up demand to want to be part of something. You know what I mean? That they want to actually be able to look around and feel like these people are like me. And we're kind of distanced from that in our current kind of what's going on online, what's going on in terms of movies and TV, what's going on, what are people talking about, where are people really spending their money socially? Are they like out partying with large groups all the time, or are they going to small? It's getting more expensive to do anything right now, so a lot of
Well,
people are staying home.
yeah, I mean, I think that's very true. I think some of it is people are still cautious about whatever illness
Yep.
and the germs that are out there. So there are those that are still like that. Um, and I agree with you because I think my journey has led me to groups where I really felt like I could share what I was going through, and realizing that biggest thing was realizing I was not alone. And I think that unless you have a group of people to share, like to have that kind of relationship with,
Yes.
you navigate life thinking that I'm the only one in the world that feels like this or that's going through this at the moment. And, when we have no other, like, the two things happen. Like, I mean, you can then look at it and blame everyone else for your issues, or you take it internally and you blame yourself for everything.
Right.
Then, if I was better, if I was smarter, if I was, whatever, if I, all of a sudden you're less than, or you blame externally. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, or you blame externally and then you're not responsible for everything and everybody else is to blame
Yes.
for whatever you're going through. But I do think that you need a group of people who authentically and offer you valuable suggestions, like, or if it's available. And because I think part of what happens is people, because I know that I go there, is people offer me a suggestion, for example, and it's overwhelming to me. It's a new language, it's something that I'm totally not comfortable with. And I'm like, and then all of a sudden I get so anxious because whatever they're suggesting seems so overwhelming and so not in my wheelhouse, so to speak. I just avoid doing it because it's just too much.
Yep.
But they might be offering advice, but they're not offering me practical help in doing it. And so then I'm like, okay, well, and so I just stay in the same place. I'm really, if somebody wants a health solution, I'll tell you exactly what you need to do. And I know I can't do it for you. That's your work, but I'll do my best to support you. But I will give you guidance and directions and tell you where to go and what to look for and what to take and, kind of thing as a health coach.
Sure.
But I think that that's where people get like, and so it's not only just having a group of people, it's having a group of people who are going to sit there and say, okay, well, like you said, finding when we were on before is finding a group of people who'll sit there and say, well, I'm good at this, you're good at this, let's partner, let's work together, and let's create something because each one of us has our strengths.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah. I'm the more I'm listening to you, I'm starting to wonder if people um, are they kind of numb to traditional motivations? The whole notion of getting ahead. Is anybody playing that game at the moment? I mean, I'm 70 years old and I'm not in the mainstream running around all the time, but I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing people who are really feeling like if they don't have what it takes to get something done, they're not interested in looking for coaching. They're not interested in looking to Jan to see if you can help with their health issues. They're more or less like, I read this, I saw this on on YouTube, whatever.
Well, it's interesting because I think I do think that I think some of it is a financial issue. So I've spoken to people who it's not in their they don't have the income to be able to pay for a coach or pay for, let's say, let's get practical, a yoga class. They're like, I can get online and take a yoga class.
Right.
And so some of it is the fact that people may be looking to do things that um that are not going to cost them as much, that are going to be for free, where they don't have to make that financial investment. And I was listening to a wonderful mindfulness podcast on mindfulness yesterday, and I want to re-listen to it. But one thing she said, which I thought was really interesting, was that if you read something or if you watch, like, let's say she was talking about mindfulness and having a teacher and someone who taught her mindfulness. And she said, there's no like that whole personalization. So she said that part of the gift was like you would go to the teacher and they would say, this is what you need to do. These are the practices that, what, in conversation, in like this dialogue, these are the things that would help you. This is like the practice that would probably fit most with your day, with your time, with your whatever.
Sure.
And then when you go and you read a book, or when somebody tries to create this sort of cookie cutter solution of like, if you want to be mindful, you need to take these 5 steps. Or if you want to be healthy, you need to do these 5 things. Well, it's really no different to me than traditional medicine, where they try to compartmentalize that. Like, we're all individuals. So that's the gift of working with a coach or somebody else, is that customization of somebody sitting there and listening to you and saying, okay, well, this is what's important to them.
Yes.
So, so this is what we're going to focus on.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. There's a distinction between having an experienced coach, if you will. And I'm talking about somebody who's dealt with a lot of different people and has many tools in the kit to go at something where somebody seems to be stopped. And it's the difference, in my opinion, between having a school teacher who's coming out of college and you're their first class, if you will, and they're not sure how to handle the social aspect of it, of having 20 kids that are unruly or whatever, versus somebody who's been doing it for 15 years, who basically just stands and looks and glares at everybody until they become quiet, and they do. But the point is that the missing customization, the missing interpersonal relationship, the team aspect of it, and there's always more probability of success when there's a team working on a problem than just going at it at yourself. First of all, you can't really see all of the aspects of of what's going on. For instance, a golf coach. There's no way, if you've ever swung a golf club, that you can ever know what it looks like over the back of your head. But a golf coach can walk over and lift your arm up just a little bit and say, hey, feel this in your body. That's what having your club parallel to the ground feels like. When you get the ball, after being parallel to the ground in the take back, you're going to come swinging through with a lot more energy. And, it's the same thing, looking at people and having them say, I'm trying these steps and they're not working. And then you actually break it down and they show you what they're doing in the steps, and they are actually trying. That's all they're doing. They're not completing any of the steps, fully. They're not mastering the individual steps in, themselves. They're doing a string of things and thinking that they're done with it, and then not getting any results and wondering why. And that's what happens when you just do a video on YouTube. You got to have, friends in your life that you're constantly interacting with, and everybody's socially growing each other. That's the cool thing, is to be around people, and all of a sudden somebody just comes out with, what I love about you, Jan? Jan, I love that you always have some kind of an essential oil answer to whatever the heck's going on in my life. I love you for that. You're such a good listener. You know what I mean? You can't get that by reading a book.
No, well, it's funny that you say that, but I agree with you. And I think the other thing, like as you were talking about the golf club, I was thinking about, like, I have a client now and I see her in person. And one day I actually took out my phone and because, I'm describing it to her. I'm trying to put my hand on it. I'm trying to visually, like, show her what to do in my body. And then one day she's in the pose and I snapped a photo. And all of a sudden she was like, oh. And then it was just like, and so sometimes this one is like that whole idea of people learn in different ways and grasp in different ways,
Yes.
you know, and offering people enough ways so that they get it, so that they can incorporate it, so that
Yes.
they can integrate it into, whatever they do. So now, hopefully, when she goes to do that again, she has that image in her head. And it's practice because, if we haven't done that pose for a really long time because we've been doing different things. And I don't know that if we go back and I tell her again whether she's not going to do the same thing because she hasn't done it in a month, per se, just because we've been doing other, a lot more mindfulness and a lot more meditation and a lot less of the physical practice because of what she's wanted. So sometimes it's just, it's the idea of revisiting. It's kind of like, oh, I don't feel this now. Let me go back and revisit again. Or do I feel it now? And, and having basically, it's not even that you can't, it's just that I like the word elusive. It's elusive.
Well, if it's not habit, then you have to go and try to figure out, what was it that I did that felt so good,
I was absolutely, because I think sometimes you get that. You do have that feeling, and then that's what keeps you coming back to do it because you want that. It's like, oh, that felt great. I want to recreate that. Um, but the part of it is like, oh my gosh, like, how can I feel that? What does it feel like? And I think that when you are with other people and other people, whether that be feedback or coaches or, whatever it is, sometimes, that's why you can listen to something. Like, you can listen to a topic or listen to something and all of a sudden somebody phrases it in one way.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I get it. Like, click. And, I think that's the value of surrounding yourself with really interesting and really different people because all it is the way they term it, what terminology they bring to it or what phrasing. And it could be the space you're in that day too, obviously, where all of a sudden you're more open to it or something and you clicked. I remember years ago somebody describing something to me and I was like not interested at all. And then finally when I was ready, I was like, oh my gosh, really like this.
Yeah, I'm kind of just sitting here thinking to myself that there's kind of a malaise, in terms of people being numb and having gone through so many disparate experiences in the last 5 or 8 years. I mean, everything from the world was on fire. I mean, things were going so well. 2018, 2019, we were coming out of the dark. I mean, folks were getting excited about business. The people were building buildings again, putting roofs on, skyscrapers, all this kind of stuff. And then the world came crashing to its knees in 2020 with COVID.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, yeah, and I know the word trauma is kind of an overused word now. I mean, people feel like it's overused. but I really do feel like it was a trauma. Like, it was this abrupt, what felt abrupt, kind of cut off from civilization, from people, from, um along with the fear
Yeah.
and I think that all of a sudden a lot of, I think, what we, I don't wanna say took for granted, but a lot of the things which were, let's say, broken or not optimum, all of a sudden we realized how optimum they were. Like, all of
Right.
a sudden, lifestyle factors. For example, the fact that, we always looked at being, like, some of us, like, leaving home and getting a job outside of, like, where your family lived, and having, like, being very successful on that end, whether it didn't matter where you were, like, your family lived in, you know Washington State and you were in Florida, but that was okay because you had this great job and maybe you had a, and all of a sudden not being around close family members or people or friends where you grew up, all of a sudden got to be very like, oh my gosh, I guess I never realized how important this was and how much I needed this until it wasn't there.
Yeah, and that happened to everyone everywhere all over.
All
The
over.
whatever compensatory, things you put into your life, like bowling on Wednesday with folks from work, or just going out, for cocktails and conversation, one night a week. None of those things were possible again. So here you are, not only distanced from your relatives geographically, now all you can do is talk to people, the person next door on Zoom, or
Right.
or somebody who's got COVID, in your own house, who's in a room isolated from everybody else, and you have to talk to them on the computer.
Right. Exactly. And then the fact that, like, here we are where people maybe had sort of distanced themselves, and depending on where you lived and your environment and the town, and whatever the area of the country or the world, of like how you are, how close are you with your neighbors?
Yeah.
And and then all of a sudden it takes on a whole new meaning of like, I really don't know my neighbors. So me going over and saying, well, can we have a chat, even if it's outside on the front lawn? And, depending on whether you have that gift of gab or whether you feel um, comfortable enough doing that, and whatever social contacts you had, you didn't have. Like, even just if it's like, I look at my mom, who, my siblings are very much into like, she should get her groceries delivered because it's hard for her to like schlep the bags in and everything. And I'm of the mindset of like, that is an opportunity for her to go out, let's see, at least once a week and interact with other people.
Right.
And that socialization. And so even if you're not the gift of gab type person, or you don't have that social skill, being able to have easy conversation with people you don't know, um, you have like, if you shop in the store and you would actually interact with other people in that store.
You just gave me an idea. How cool would it be, rather than going online and ordering all of your stuff from the grocery store and having it delivered to your home? How really cool would it be for you to go around with somebody shopping with them, and you pick the stuff off of the shelves and tell them to put it in the cart, check it all out, pay for it, then they deliver it to your home after you've driven home yourself. That would be so cool for a group of people, especially folks that are 80s and 90s that are still maintaining a residence.
That's right. I mean, and I mean, I love that idea. For my mother, I've been very focused on, getting that socialization part of it out of
Yeah.
it. And depending on the time of year, like certain times of the year, like for her being in very hot weather, in the summer, I'm in a state that's very hot, it's hard because lugging big bags, in 90, 100 degrees with 100% humidity, I can understand why she wants that. It's like even more physically draining than when it's cool outside, obviously. So I get that. But I guess my hesitation is always that, like, She's very, and don't get me wrong, she is very happy being home,
Yes.
but I do worry about that lack of, you know, having a conversation with another person or seeing another person's face, um, eh, eh, on a regular basis.
There's nothing like it. And you can't, you can't compensate for it, or when it's not there, you can't really evaluate how much of a difference it makes to you. It's like getting used to not eating 3 meals a day, you know, that some people go through a period of life where they just don't eat. And it just feels normal for them that they don't eat. And they get, you know, less strong, they get no exercise, and they're in kind of a spiral that deteriorates until somebody comes in and says, holy mackerel, what do you weigh? You look like skin and bone. Let's get you a bowl of honey nut Cheerios here. Get started on something. But the social aspect is what I'm talking about. We didn't know that being isolated from other human beings for that long would change how we were as people.
Yeah, no, I agree with you so much so. And I think we didn't realize, we didn't know what we were missing. We didn't realize the impact it would have. We didn't understand how things would change. Like, I think all of a sudden, certain things, I had a conversation with a friend this week, and we were talking about facial expressions and body language when you're talking to somebody.
Right.
And how that even on Zoom or on whatever, you're seeing a square of a person. And yes, now we can see people's face. We have no idea what, body expression, how someone, I mean, to like chest up, but how someone's holding themselves, where their arms are. There's a lot to be told, like a lot to be learned from those aspects. And so I think that seeing everybody in a little box on a screen, obviously it's wonderful. I mean, I've connected with people all over the world. Don't get me wrong, I love it. And I have some really, really what I consider close friends now, like you said about poking in the beginning,
Yes.
that are all over the world now, or I would consider them some of my closest friends. But there is still that need for someone local. And I think that like someone in my area that, let's say that lives near me,
Yes.
because you need both.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. Personally, I find myself completely changed. For 20 years, if somebody of value would say to me, hey, let's get together in New Haven. What do you got? What do you need? Remember, we used to talk on the phone, and we used to work things out, and we'd make decisions and all that kind of. No, let's get together in New Haven. All right, I'm there. I've gotten on a plane, and this is really cool because I got on a plane and I flew to Philadelphia to spend a lunch with a friend of mine that I hadn't seen since high school because he was coming in from Guam for the first time since he got out of the military. And we had a 3-hour lunch. And then I got back on a plane in Philadelphia and flew back to Hartford, to get to come home. But, that sort of a thing. And then when I was networking, like really a bull goose loony master networker, 11 different network meetings a month, meeting with 300 or 400 people all the time. I would drive anywhere, do anything. I would meet with 1 or 2 people. It always was my goal to get the most out of every get together I possibly could. I don't feel like that anymore. I feel like when I show up and the people that show up, sometimes it's harder work to get them to come out of their whatever it is that they're in and just kind of participate in a real meaningful conversation, give and take and all of that sort of thing. And then every once in a while, I am so rewarded. It just makes me feel so glad that I am here. And I bless this day that I was alive and around for this conversation, sort of a thing. But I just feel for people who have never had that much zing in their life, that they couldn't wait to get to a room that was an hour and a half away, to hang out with the people and just see what cool things would come of it.
Yeah, but I think that, like I look at it and I look at, let's say the world I came from. And I think sometimes, when you're in a situation, and not that your life is bad, but you really don't realize what you're missing. Like, did I ever
Yes.
think I was really missing anything? No. I mean, I loved what I did. I was happy at what I did. And just
Right.
realizing that not everybody is meant to like live life like you. Like, not everybody is meant. There are people that are really, you know, I mean, not in a critical way. Like, there are people that are very happy, you know, being at home, like, taking care of their immediate family. They feel very fulfilled. They feel very, like I've given of myself to the world because I've given to my family, my kids, or whatever. And I've really no big draw to go out there in the world and have this huge, or have a, sort of impact. My impact is on them and they go out and they impact the world kind of thing. And then I look at what I did and was perfectly content doing what I was doing for a good chunk of my life. And I don't look at that as being wasteful or bad or whatever. It was just that who I was in that place. That was a really like, I loved it. And then a point came where I was like, okay, well, there needs to be a change. So I need to make that change. But I think that not everybody, we're all different and we all have different things that kind of feed us. And the question is, what feeds you?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yes. And,
yeah.
and I guess what I'm agreeing with you on is that we're all kind of going through this, these waves up and down of what's important and what isn't important. And, what's motivating on one day, the next day, it's like, again, like the yoga position that we can't remember. It's like, what was I doing? And the fundamental, discipline and techniques for having a life that really works and that kind of excites you to get out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning every single day. That's what I lived for 40 or 50 years, building something.
Yeah, I think that's, it's really interesting because I was having this conversation with my mom one day and I was, she says, she made this comment to me one day and she said, like, I think especially now that my dad's passed away and
Yes.
so much of her time was spent making sure he was okay, of not caring for him and just making sure, like, was he safe? Like, making sure he was eating, that kind of thing. That she's kind of wondering, and she made this comment about her purpose. Like, she's not quite sure of her purpose now.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens when if we, even if we have a strong foundation, is like something shifts. And, I've asked myself that question, things change. And I'm like, okay, well, what's my purpose now? Like, why am I here? What do I bring to the world? What can I, that kind of thing. And I had an interesting sort of aha moment the other day as I was, um, my cousin passed away last week. And so I had the funeral online on Monday. And so I'm online for the funeral and it's um, her son spoke, her son-in-law spoke, and her grandson was like a representative of all the grandchildren. Her eldest grandson. I think it's her oldest grandson. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, I don't have kids. Like, I don't have like, you know, like what kind of legacy am I leaving? And then I thought of two things. One was my book contribution that we were in,
Yes.
and then this book that I'm currently contributing to, which is much more of like not one snapshot of one part of my life, is much more of a reflection of like a lot of more of my life. And I thought, this is my legacy. Like, if I can leave this for somebody and this helps them in some way, this shows them, if this gives them hope or to realize, it talks a lot about values and things like that, foundation. I'm like, okay, that's my legacy.
Yeah.
And I think that all of a sudden, that was hugely, you know, like, I wanna say rewarding, but rewarding not in a, like, sort of like in this, like, "Okay, now I can," like, if something were to happen tomorrow, not hoping it doesn't, then I'll have known that I made a difference in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I
And
think that that's when people, like, have their like, when things change so much, it's like those are the questions we ask. It's like, "Okay," like, "Why am I here?"
well, see that you don't have that question when you're working on something meaningful. When you've decided that it means something to you to leave something in the world, and then you work on that, I mean, that's where you've decided there's something greater than yourself. And I was alluding to that. And I think that's what church kind of represented for a lot of people going into a community where people were excited to see you. They had expectations of the fun they were going to have with you, and whatever conversation that you'd have would be talking about sports with this group over here. It might be talking about what we're going to do for the Christmas pageant with this group over here. And at the end of the day, these were folks who, with their energy and their intention, raised us up, you know? And when that went away in our culture, and it seems like it's more difficult to find it, it's out there. And in many cases, you got to build that stuff yourself, and invite people to come and play. And if you do it long enough and hard enough, pretty soon you'll actually have something going on there where you are once again building something. But there's a huge difference between having a life where there are things that you enjoy doing and then having a life that you think is meaningful in that it's going to make a difference with other people.
Yeah, but it can be less, but they can be the same. Like, I think that, they can be the same thing. Like, I really loved writing this book and being with these people that I'm contributing with because there are 7 of us.
Right?
But yet, I really do think it is going to leave a legacy and make a difference in a lot of people's lives. So they're not independent of each other. They're very intertwined and intermingled.
Maybe.
And
I'm glad you're saying that. Let's keep going so that we can understand each other. What I'm
yeah,
saying to you, what I'm saying to you is that if you enjoy writing the book, when the book is gone, you got nothing. But if you enjoy writing the
oh
book
yeah,
in a background of the reason I'm writing the book is the community that becomes available in this book writing experience, that I'm not only making a difference to other people someday in the future, I'm making a difference to my community now. And I'm making a difference for me.
oh
Remove the book there, it's called What Do We Do Next Together, right?
well, yeah, I know, and we're working on another book when this one
There
is
you
done,
go.
if not multiple books, and
But that's the distinction. That's what I'm trying to tell you. People try to get satisfied in what they're doing, making their first $1 million, having a trophy wife, having a big, beautiful house with 3 cars out in front, having their kids go to the best schools. And at the end of the day, they feel like, what the hell did I do with my life? What
no,
was missing?
I mean, I agree with you, especially because you said one thing that really resonated, and that was like, you write the book for yourself, you write the book for other. And I think one thing that resonated with me is that, because unless you have that self part, like, then there's always somebody else that's going to have more than you do.
Right.
Like, that's going to have 5 cars, that's going to have, the latest, greatest, whatever. Gonna have the plane, gonna have, if you have 1 million, they're gonna have 5 million. Like, like, it's endless. And so unless you have that self kind of like, oh my gosh, I really did this. I did this for me. I did this, what a difference this made in the small group of 7 of us. What a difference it's gonna make for the people who then go on to read it. Then all of
Exactly.
a sudden there's so much, then there's the ripple. Um, and I think that one of the other things she said, now it's, I'll see if it comes back to me, but if it doesn't, it'll wait till next week.
or whatever. See, the neat part of having a conversation with a friend is that anything can come up at any time.
It's right, exactly, exactly.
You
But
know,
it
and we do get attached to our great ideas. You know what I mean? It's like I can remember years ago, I would keep a notepad, you know, and a pen next to my bed, so that when I woke up at 2 or 3 o'clock, and it came to me that I wanted to make sure I did something the following day, or a really great idea that I had in a dream or something like that. I don't bother with that anymore. And the main reason for that is that the ideas that I have, when I have them, I will speak them into my phone and put them onto a list. Every once in a while I go back and I review that list and I see if they find, you know, if they really kind of sounded as good to me now as they did when I put them on the list. And sometimes they do, and sometimes not so much. But
Mhm, mhm.
in a conversation with other people, it's like the chain reaction of thoughts, for me anyway, is that it leads through a logical progression, and sooner or later we hit it. And it means more now because we're sharing it in a conversation between the two of it. It's not just a thought that I had. We made it up together newly. You know what I mean?
We created something, and I think that's the gift of having, you know, a conversation. And, is on an audio room that I was well, this is Zoom because there are no audio rooms anymore, on LinkedIn. So it was on a Zoom, and we were talking about, um, basically not agreeing with somebody, or confrontation, or and that whole idea of when you have that kind of energy that comes together,
Yes.
if you can have, like, a conversation around that, I mean, then that's where possibilities and invention happens, because that's where, if you can both come together. And that's why, you know, I mean, if we never communicated and never interacted with each other, evolution, or we never would have, we never would have perpetuated as a race. Like, it just wouldn't have happened because, we have limited whatever capabilities, however you want to call it, gifts, capabilities, or whatever, resources. But then all of a sudden, you get together with someone else and they have more. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, well, you have compliments or whatever. Or what you're saying is, what can we do? And all of a sudden it grows.
Yeah.
But that doesn't happen if we're always by ourselves.
It can't happen when you're by yourself. And I'll tell you why. If you are going to assign any value to my thought that satisfaction comes from being engaged in a life right now that is contributing to something greater than yourself, that's always got to involve another partner or a group of people, in a team or a community. And when people discover that being by themselves yields whatever results that it does, just hanging out with other people that are like-minded and have positive energy can 10x that, like immediately, if not sooner. And what's really cool about it is that when you're in a group of people or a community or a team, it's got a likelihood of actually coming true in the world, because now you've got all these resources and other people like solving problems that you didn't know that the cool idea that you had even had, right?
Mhm.
So the neat part of the, where folks go away to think it over and come up with an idea or a decision, it's like, no, it's almost better to talk things through with somebody else, because the thing that you don't think of will come out in that conversation with somebody else. It can't come out of your mind by itself a priori. I mean, without, previous understanding or some other way of accessing it. It's like this conversation we have every single week. We can't have that alone, can we?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, we can't. Um, and we got online. I look at the workshop that I just got off of yesterday, the in-person workshop that, was such a great success. And I look at, like, each one of us brought something, and not one of us could have done that on our own. That it was the three of us coming together that actually had the greatest impact. and was the greatest success. I mean, it just doesn't. It's like the collaboration book that I'm working on. My story would be great, but the fact that it's 7 stories all together from people who are different parts of the world, different genders, different ages, and all our stories and the themes that are common within each story has so much more impact coming from 7 different people with sort of vast backgrounds and beliefs. And just now it's like it dissolves borders and differentiation, because then you realize the commonality between everybody,
Yeah.
and versus the differences, which is always the way I like to focus on, is like, what makes us the same versus what makes us different.
Yeah.
And so I think that, it's only in the gift of having others in your life, and I mean, there are ways to connect, to connect with the universe, connect with the world, connect with the earth. But to me, you still need human connection.
Yeah. Depending on what you want to have in your life, it is what it is alone, and then it's something else when you're not alone.
Yeah. I mean, I look at, being able to connect with pets and being able to
Yeah.
connect with nature, and the fact that I've like a huge person. I'm like, I love to get outside depending on the weather and really connect with nature, breathe in fresh air. But,
Sure.
and that is a great connection for me, but it's different than connecting with another person.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're getting there, and I just want to say that all of the things that I've said in this last hour or so, they're my perspectives on what I'm seeing or what I think I'm seeing, and it really is very nice for me to be able to check in with you, Jan, and
Um,
and just be able to hear it out loud and hear what your thoughts are on the subject and everything. I really honor that, and I cherish it, and value our conversations. I love it, as a matter of fact.
yeah, me too, Bill. Really, and I hope that, I mean, I know that Bill, and I hope that something we say resonates or kind of hits home for you, even if it's just to say that I don't believe a single thing they're saying, but
Exactly. That's a valid reaction. Y'all
that's
are
right.
full of cheese, man.
Exactly.
So, any thoughts to kind of tie things together, other than giving everybody that disclaimer?
I mean, I guess look at who you do interact with and what your connections are. Like, not in a like just in a I want to say in a just kind of general overview, almost like you're outside looking at it, not in this overly, analytical kind of analyzing, but just like this overview of the relationship and everything. And because we talked about like-minded, and I'm not saying that you don't want to, not everybody is the same as you, but I was talking to a client this morning and she was voicing the fact that there are certain things that her family doesn't like get about her at all. And I think they tend to like get very critical about it. And I'm like, well, there's certain things I don't share with certain people. I said, because I don't, and I've, you know, I think that's the gift of friends, and hopefully having people in your life that you can kind of surround yourself that are your biggest advocates, in addition to people maybe who do that, because that helps you like kind of, but I think you need the people who are going to be your cheerleaders
Sure.
and support you. So just look around at people and realize what you know, what is this relationship to me? You know, I think that's important, because I think we do outgrow people. And I think there are points in our lives where that's why certain people come in our life for a short period of time and then leave, and other people are in our lives for a very long time.
Yeah.
And, because I think that every now and then we have to look at that.
And every once in a while, you'll hop on a plane and fly down to Philadelphia to have lunch with somebody you haven't seen in 30 years.
Exactly.
Well, I'll tell you what, I love everything you've said. I'm going to jump right straight to our ask.
Okay.
Ladies
Please.
and gentlemen, we love you. We want you to know that we think the world of you, and we're always here for you. Now I'm going to ask you to turn around and reach out to somebody that you know, that you love, and let them know that your life works because they are in it. And if they ever need you, that you'll be there for them.
Absolutely.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And thank you, Jan. I love you.
I love you too, Bill.
All right. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Xvadio Podcast Network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.